Ladies and gentlemen, we have a massive bombshell report coming out of San Francisco via Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard about the Brock Purdy and San Francisco 49er contract negotiations. Before we dive into that, though, don't forget to like, share, subscribe on the audio podcasting platforms. Give us that 5-star review, and let's talk about the latest coming out of San Francisco via Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard. I think it's important to get one thing out of the way. When you're talking about the Niners and Brock Purdy's contract negotiations, it's very obvious. Something is going to get done. Brock Purdy's going to get paid. The only question is how much and for how long will the extension keep him in San Francisco? Could it be 5 years? Could he get $35 million per year? May he get $65 million per year? Nobody knows exactly what's going on, but Tim Kawakami today gave us one of the more intriguing and insightful reports we've received thus far during the offseason, because as of now, the only thing we really know is that they want to get a deal done sooner rather than later, but this report by Tim Kawakami gives us more insight into what exactly the Niners are looking for as they negotiate a contract with Brock Purdy. So, again, Brock's gonna get paid. John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have both confirmed it. Brock Purdy has reassured it's gonna happen. It's just about when, the timing, and the pricing of his future contract. We did get some really good news first, because Tim Kawakami starts off his report by essentially giving us I guess you can say a not firm, but a tender timeline, if you will, as to when they want to get things done. And I quote here via Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard: "I received no questions about Brock Purdy's contract situation, which is the true pivot point of this offseason. Clearly, Niner fans don't seem too worried about this negotiation. Speaking for myself here, I think I speak for all of you out there. There isn't a worry as to if Brock Purdy gets paid. Like, I'm not concerned about, are they going to pay Brock Purdy? I think everybody assumes it'll get done eventually. Whether it's now or later, it'll get done ahead of the 2025 NFL season. But Kawakami continues here that this will probably get done, but the timing is important too. The Niners and Purdy don't want this stretching into OTAs and minicamp, forcing Purdy to make a decision whether to skip those sessions or hold in or hold out." I think that's really important there, that the San Francisco 49ers have been unfortunately prone to let contract negotiations linger. Whether it's Nick Bosa, who signed the Thursday prior to Week 1 a couple of years back. Last season, a major example of this, Trent Williams didn't sign till about a week and a half prior to Week 1 against the Jets on Monday Night Football. Brandon Ayuk signed about 3 weeks prior to the season after an extended hold-in with the team. The Niners don't mind letting these contract negotiations linger into OTAs and training camp, and unfortunately at times, like last year, it hurts them. We all saw what Brandon Ayuk looked like pre-injury. He looked like a shell of himself, was not that dominant, separating number one receiver we all thought he'd be after getting paid, and hoped he would return to being after signing his contract, because when he was healthy, he was phenomenal in the first couple years of his career as that number one separating receiver. This year, though, contract hold in, wants to get paid, caused quite the ruckus, if you will, during the offseason. The commander conversations, the trade talks were ongoing. It seems like every single day there was new reports coming out on social media about what's going to happen with Ayuk. So all that to say, San Francisco doesn't mind contract negotiations lingering, which is why it's really good to hear that they want to get this thing done with Brock Purdy, that they don't even want to get into OTAs and minicamp. And I think that timeline there, it's great because it allows them to figure out what they're going to do to free agency and the NFL draft, pay those guys, make the big moves, make the small moves, it allows them to almost just focus on one thing at a time. Get through free agency, get through the draft, and then when you have that kind of dead period of football where nothing's really happening, rookies are moving to their respective teams' areas, they're getting hotels, they're kind of getting accommodated to a new living space, then you go to sign Brock Purdy. then you really hammer out the negotiations, get the details done, because I think as we saw last year, while you have your stories of the bad things that come with holding out and holding in, not being involved in OTAs and minicamp like Ayuk and Brock Purdy last year, there was no chemistry, things were off. You also have the great stories about, Juwan Jennings this year being a massive breakout star for San Francisco, kind of becoming a really a strong number 2 option in this offense. And you see him 25 yards away from 1,000 yards for the first time in his career this season, had it not been for a Week 18 ejection. You saw the groundwork for a season like that was laid during OTAs, during minicamp, being there day in, day out, working with his quarterbacks, getting his reps, and having that timing that as soon as the regular season hits, there is no ramp-up period. You're ready to go. You're good to go from day one. I do like that San Francisco and Brock Purdy, they want to avoid that. They want to avoid missing those valuable reps with the receivers. In my mind, you go to Ricky Pearsall, who had no offseason program last year because of injury and getting shot. I want to see him and Purdy together every single day in training camp and OTAs, working on their craft, gaining chemistry. They're like, you go back to the Montana era, the Brady era. Montana and Jerry Rice often talk about how their chemistry was so great, they could throw the football with the lights off. They just knew where each other was going to be. Rice knew his routes, and Montana knew where that ball needed to be for Rice to catch it. Well, I'm not comparing Brock and Pearsall or Brock and Ayuk or even Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Juwan Jennings to Montana and Jerry Rice. I think it's important to point out that timing matters. You see in this offense that timing matters. Being there, building chemistry matters when it comes to quarterback and receiver play, and an offense predicated on over the middle of the field passes, timing, anticipation with Brock Purdy, your reads, and how you can deceive coverage. You even saw last year too, I guess 2 years ago now, when Ayuk or when Deebo wasn't healthy, Ayuk couldn't step up, Juwan wasn't getting things done, and when this team had to target, McLeod and Chris Conley at times, or Ronnie Bell, there was clear distinctions from receivers Brock was comfortable throwing to where he wasn't comfortable throwing to. So I think the Niners and Brock wanting to get this thing out of the way early in the offseason program allows you to have the building blocks in place for a really great season for Brock himself on a selfish level, a singular output level, but also for the team to kind of, look, you were 6-11. The NFC West is still out there for the taking. Nobody really stands out to be like the number 1 top dog, even in the NFC as a whole. The Lions lost their OC, their DC. Who is Jared Goff without Ben Johnson? You'll see. The Eagles are a really good defense, but the offense is not great, albeit they're playing in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks' time. The NFC's for the taking. And I think for San Francisco, having an off year came at a really good time for them. However, despite San Francisco maybe having a good offseason thus far, bringing in Saleh, Brant Boyer, having $50 million in cap space to play with, 10 draft picks this year, and the 11th overall draft pick outside of the top 10, they're in a really good spot. And if you get Purdy's contract done pre-OTAs or early into OTAs, you really are setting yourself up for a phenomenal season. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that's the case. But you're at least giving yourself a chance to do that. That said, it doesn't mean everything is great. Doesn't mean everything Kawakami is saying here, because I'll continue in a second, is good. Because with that said, they want to get things done. Kawakami continues by essentially telling us that sounds great, and you hope that's the case, but in reality, San Francisco may be targeting a contract that is more akin to that of Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield, not as Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, and Dak Prescott, and that could maybe push Brock Purdy and his agent to be a little hesitant to sign a contract that early in preseason or during the offseason program. I do want to tell you this, though, before we get into the bad news and what San Francisco is offering out there and what they're hoping to sign Brock Purdy to contract-wise, I want to let you know you can use our promo code right here, 49ers Access, 49 ERS ACC ESS at SeatGeek.com, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Again, SeatGeek.com, promo code 49ers Access, all capitals, 49 ERS ACC ESS, $20 off your first purchase. And our new sponsor, Goat Fuel, right here. Do you want to perform like the GOAT Jerry Rice himself? Well, if you want to, you gotta get yourself a can of Goat Fuel. Whether you're an athlete or a normal person like myself, Goat Fuel can bring the best out of all of us. And for those of you out there who cannot go a day without your coffee, but want a healthy alternative, click that link down below in the description and get yourself some Goat Fuel today to feel like the greatest of all time. Now let's get to the bad news. Let's get to the, I don't want to say really bad news, but it certainly was not what I was expecting, because a lot of the conversations around Brock have been he'll get $50 million. He'll get 65 and reset the market. And, you know, while yes, Brock will get paid, I don't think anybody really saw what Kawakami reports coming. And I'll read it here for you in a second. But again, my assumption was Brock's going to get, you know, what the market dictates. It may not be Dak Prescott money, but it might be Herbert money. It might be Tua Tagovailoa money. Like, those are the names you're hearing comparing Brock Purdy to when it comes to what his contract may value out as when things are all said and done. However, Kawakami, what he reports, is drastically different from what the consensus has been the last few months or so when talking about Brock Purdy's contract. So Kawakami reports that while the Niners and Purdy are trying to avoid a contract dispute, don't want any holdouts or hold-ins, the Niners are trying an alternative contract layout to come to an agreement. They don't want this Dak Prescott stuff. They want something a little different that really hasn't been talked about just yet. So again, I quote from Tim Kawakami himself, "I heard from a plugged-in NFL source this week that the Niners and Purdy's camp are indeed feeling like there won't be fireworks on the way to an eventual deal." That in itself essentially means, look, no drama, or there's no holdouts, no holds in. It's a very straightforward negotiation. We're not going to deal with the lavish, and he's not going to post on social media saying, come get me, or, you know, be on TikTok talking to other teams' receivers like Brandon Ayuk was with Jaden Daniels during the offseason. That's not going to be the case. Brock is an Iowa boy. He has his cornfields out there. He has his John Deere endorsements. He has his J.C. Penney's chino pants and his sweaters. He's not a lavish person, and he seems pretty humble. But despite all those great things, Kawakami continues here saying, "But I have also heard generally that the framework might be a little different than recent quarterback deals. I suspect this means the Niners could be pitching a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed deal compared to the full-time commitment deals signed by Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, and other quarterbacks over the last few years." Now, that right there is an eye-opening statement to make. The fact that San Francisco isn't eyeing deals like Trevor Lawrence, like Justin Herbert, like Dak Prescott, and maybe even Tua Tagovailoa, who got over $50 million a year with the Dolphins. Instead, they want a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed contract with Brock Purdy. That to me in itself, while, you know, that's kind of the dream you want for a team, you want to sign your top tier players to smaller contracts. Kawakami asks here to end his report, will Purdy and his agent be happy with that? Assuredly, there'll be some negotiations, but nobody makes their best offer right off the bat. It may take some time. Now, I think it's important to clarify this, that what a player gets per year doesn't really matter. Kawachipto says here, AAV doesn't mean much. You are 1,000% correct that you see the number kind of trotted out there. Oh, Dak got $65 million. Lawrence got 60. Burrow got 60. And technically it's true. A lot of it comes down to guarantees. But even then, in Kawakami's report, had he said they want a shorter term, less annual value contract, this wouldn't be that big of a deal. But the fact that he's saying the Niners want a shorter term, lesser guaranteed contract, that's why this is a massive deal for Brock Purdy in his contract negotiations. Because AAV is relevant. It's what you're guaranteed. And if San Francisco is saying, look, we don't want to give you a 5-year deal. We want you on a 3-year deal instead. We don't want you for, $150 million guaranteed. We want to give you 50 guaranteed. That is a far cry from what Purdy's success has indicated he'd get on the open market, because take Trevor Lawrence, for example. That's a quarterback that Kawakami mentions in his article. Trevor Lawrence, first overall pick, I get it. He's built like, how a quarterback's supposed to look. There's certainly potential still in Trevor Lawrence to be a great quarterback, but he signed a contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars for 5 years, $275 million, with $200 million in total guarantees. Now, Trevor Lawrence, for as good as he could be, has had one really good season where they almost beat KC in the playoffs, and you felt, okay, they're one season away from being a contender in the AFC. However, compared to Brock Purdy, he is nowhere near as successful as Purdy has been. Purdy's won more playoff games, been to a Super Bowl, 2 NFC championship games, maybe had he been healthy, been to 2 Super Bowls, who knows. He also was a top 5 MVP finalist in 2023. If you're Brock Purdy, you go on the market saying, if that guy got $270 million and $200 million guaranteed, and I'm more successful than he's been, I want that contract and more. Now, that may be selfish to some of you out there. It may be, maybe a little disingenuous knowing the system he plays in, but I think that's how you go about things. You shoot for the stars, then bring yourself down. Whereas San Francisco, if you can believe Kawakami's report here, feels like they're lowballing him first, hoping that when they have to eventually inch their way back up the quarterback market, the hit really isn't as bad as maybe Trevor Lawrence's deal is for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I have a hard time believing that, Purdy's agents out there saying like, look, we have made absolute dog crap for money the last couple years. We've saved your, I don't want to say tenures, but we saved your heinies, your booties, because Trey Lance sucked. We have been so successful here, and the only time I have played poorly is in the rain and when the entire team is on IR. That's not fair to us to offer us a 3-year deal or a 4-year deal, a shorter-term contract with lesser guaranteed money. I don't think that desiring that for Brock is bad necessarily. I just think that everything we've heard from the 49ers, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, they love Brock Purdy. They want Brock Purdy to be in San Francisco for a long time, hence why I think that San Francisco aiming for a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed contract kind of reeks of trying to have their cake and eat it too. Because everything we've heard has been the stark contrast to what Kawakami points out here or is reporting here for the SF Standard. And I think Kawakami is one of the more plugged-in people, but again, and maybe you can tell me in the comments down below, like this doesn't really line up to as what Shanahan said as the season ended. On the final press conference between John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan during or following the Week 18 loss to the Cardinals, they talked openly about free agency, and when the conversation turned to Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan said point blank, I plan on being here with Brock Purdy. I plan on Brock being here as long as I'm here in San Francisco. You don't say that and then try to get a short-term deal done with that player. If you are truly committed to Brock Purdy and you're saying openly in front of the media that, man, like I want Brock to be here for as long as I'm here, Now, I'm not saying give him a 10-year contract, but if you're saying a shorter-term deal, is that 3 years? Is that 2 years? Like, what does that look like for you? What does it look like for Brock? Because when you say, I want Brock and I'm planning on Brock being here as long as myself, as Kyle Shanahan, well, the assumption is you'll be here for the next 5 to 10 years, hopefully if things go correctly and you win some Super Bowls. But if that's not the case and you're offering him a 3-year deal, do you not plan on being here for the long haul? It's a weird kind of conundrum, or at least maybe I'm reading too much into things, but it's a weird, like, you're saying you want Brock to be here for the long haul with yourself, but if Kawakami's report's true, and you're only giving him 3 years, then what is the intention here, right? And I think for Brock, you have to think for yourself if the reports are true here. If they don't want to give me a long-term deal, are you second-guessing me as your franchise quarterback? Like, I'm not saying I don't believe in Kawakami's report. It just makes me question a lot of what we heard. I get it. There are some out there that believe Brock isn't the guy, and that's fine. You can certainly have the opinion of that. I know he isn't Burrow, and I know he isn't Mahomes or even Herbert to a certain degree, but he certainly isn't Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. But Brock's been a top-tier starting quarterback for 2 of his 3 years in San Francisco, and so to hear them say, Brock's our guy, we love him, and we want him here as long as Kyle's here, and then a month later, reports are coming out saying that they want a short-term, lesser guaranteed contract, those don't add up. And so, now to be fair, it wouldn't be the first time San Francisco has said something publicly and changed their mind or lied publicly. Teams do this. They play the PR game. But it's a very, Kawakami's tuned in. I believe what he's saying here, and I don't blame San Francisco for, discussing these smaller terms deals. Why not? You never want to kind of condemn your team to being, to pay all these players multiple guaranteed contracts. But here's a quarterback you're talking about here. No agent, especially Brock Purdy's agent, who saw him sign and been the best bargain in football for the last 3 seasons, he's not going to sit back and say, we're not taking, you never want to be the player to hold the market back. You never want to be the first player, the first agent to essentially reset the market in a bad way. You don't want to reset the trend of not having to pay quarterbacks. That's when you get into bad territories and stuff with contracts. Tua was never going to take less. Trevor Lawrence is never going to take less. You want to know why? Because it sets a precedent of we ain't going to pay these guys. And you can look at the running back market the last couple of years. We saw it tank, and now you're seeing it kind of reclimb back up the market. You're seeing teams value the position more. Whereas if you're Brock, you cannot be somebody like Baker Mayfield and take a 3-year, $100 million deal with $50 guaranteed. You can't be Kirk Cousins and take $45 million guaranteed. You cannot be the quarterback that is 26 years old, hopefully ascending, and been this successful and take less. It's a bad precedent. And for a player like Purdy, who has again been one of the best bargains in football, you are going to be holding yourself back. Now, then you get into the conversation of market value. Now, the Niners nor Brock Purdy dictate what the market is. However, when you see Kirk Cousins getting a big contract, when you see Tua Tagovailoa getting big contracts, you have to ask yourself, how have those contracts paid off? Now, obviously, context matters. Kirk had the Achilles injury. Tua's had the concussion problems. But Niners Goat 16 asks a really great question. Who else would have paid Tua that contract? I think that's kind of the sticking point here, is that while Brock has been more successful than Tua almost in every single way, you have to ask yourself. And I think San Francisco, if the report is true, that they want to give a short-term, lesser guaranteed contract to Brock Purdy, they see what happened in Miami, of the Dolphins kind of negotiating against themselves. That they could have lowballed Tua, they could have forced his hand, they could have done things to make him either hold out or hold in, or simply just ride out his contract. Instead, they signed into a contract and things really haven't worked out there. I don't think San Francisco wants to be the team that, like the Dolphins, ties themselves to a quarterback And then in 2 years later, 5 years later, it's like, oh crap, this isn't working out. You never want to be a team that pays a mid-quarterback big money. Now, I think Brock Purdy is by far better than a mid-level quarterback, better than Dak. He's in that like 12 to 8 range for me. But I think San Francisco is seeing kind of the sins of other teams across the NFL, saying, oh, like, we don't want to get ourselves in that situation, hence maybe a more Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins style of deal, because the last thing you want to do is kind of fool yourself and negotiate against yourself. You never want to be that person. It's why, you watch Storage Wars and you hear these people, you hear, when they're trying to get these storage kind of bins and buy these units of like other people with no interest in buying the bin or the unit itself, ramping up the price. I think if you're San Francisco, while you don't hold all the cards, Brock could hold out, Brock could say no, Brock could just say, look, find a quarterback to you like, and kind of hamstring San Francisco. San Francisco could also say, look, you're under contract. We can always franchise tag you next year. Either you play or we'll go find somebody else for 1 year, which opens the door for players like Kirk Cousins, like a Joe Flacco, like a veteran quarterback, like an Aaron Rodgers. I don't think San Francisco wants to get that far, and I certainly wouldn't want to do that either. I just think that San Francisco does have some leverage here over Brock Purdy simply because they don't have to negotiate against themselves, and I don't think they will. Going down the YouTube comments here, Fish and Chips says, with Brock's resume, how he would be depressing the market from other quarterbacks behind him. Imagine their joy at him doing that exactly. Brock, for as much of a team player as he is, would be setting up other quarterbacks behind him for failure. Because the last thing you want to do is, name quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, others along those lines. The last thing you want to do is take lesser money, and then every other team's like, oh, thank God, we ain't going to pay these guys anymore. That's what, especially with a Super Bowl appearing quarterback and MVP finalist, I don't see Brock doing that. Kawachipto says here, Kawakami was speculating that part. I get it. He's only reporting the fact that that the Niners, he's heard from a source that the Niners kind of want to have a shorter term, lesser guaranteed contract. The framework may not be exactly what was expected. Now, he says here again, I suspect this is speculation, but again, when you're in tune and you're hearing certain things that you're reporting just yet behind the scenes, but you're suspecting this could be the difference, I tend to lean in believing Kawakami when it comes to suspecting a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed contract is what San Francisco is looking for. But maybe he's wrong, and we're all sitting back here talking about this for no reason, which could be the case. Happens all the time. Niners Goat 16 says, what counts against the cap? Obviously, that depends on what the contract looks like. The way San Francisco does these deals, usually they kind of backload everything and then are able to renegotiate these contracts as years go on. However, let's say, with my own speculation here, along with Kawakami's, if they're going from a 5-year deal, let's say Trevor Lawrence is the mark here that Purdy wants. 5 years, $275 million, but San Francisco wants that Baker Mayfield contract where it's 3 years, $100 million with 50 guaranteed. It does lessen his cap hit per year when it comes to the annual value, if you will, but also it almost makes it for the Niners like you have to have a more even cap hit. You're not going to have 15, 40 on a cap hit. Now maybe you could, but it also kind of hamstrings you a little bit in regards to what you can do each year, barring an extension or your renegotiation over time. So without knowing the exact details of what Kawakami is getting into, I would really refrain from diving into what the contract or the cap would look like because we don't know from what Kawakami is speculating here. I just think that, as Robbie says here, it's a good point as well. This negotiation tactic, the Niners always claim they want to keep things in-house and civil, yet they always leak things to the media. Now, we don't know exactly, where Kawakami's source comes from. It could be John Lynch himself. It can be a water boy on the sideline. I'm sure in Kawakami's case, it's a more connected source than a water boy. However, San Francisco does this all the time, plays this game all the time. Whether it's the Trey Lance, Mac Jones conversations, whether it's, trade leaks and whatnot, they are always one to put things out there, let them ride, and hope it kind of gains and garners some, traction on social media. People talk about it and hopefully, can change things for negotiations. But, in this case, it's Kawakami reporting that the Niners are trying to get a different framework of a deal done, him speculating that it can be a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed contract. Which, if it's true, then I'm shocked that's the case. However, I don't think San Francisco wants a 3-year deal. I think, yes, they could want a 5-year deal, but lesser guaranteed money. I don't think, again, like I said earlier, with what Kyle and John have said, it doesn't really add up to what Kawakami is saying and reporting or speculating on here. That's why I'm like, what is going on? And why I'm somewhat, hesitant to buy in completely. I like Tim Kawakami. I met him plenty of times. Although his Twitter and his X antics may not be the kindest, he does his due diligence. He has his sources, and usually he's, pretty in the know. However, in this case, speculating that Purdy could get a 3-year deal or a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed contract compared to what, right? Obviously, he mentions Lawrence and Herbert. That's kind of what I think Purdy wants. And so if that's the case, the obvious kind of next step is, what does that contract look like? Hence the Kirk Cousins talk and the Baker Mayfield conversation comparisons. Bobo says here that Brock Purdy, fish and chips, what's going on, man? Yes, international audience, how you doing? Bobo says here that Brock Purdy is not worth a penny more than Geno Smith. I would push back wholeheartedly on that. I would say that Brock is a better quarterback than Geno. He is more willing to use his legs, a better processor. I get this year is tainted some to what Purdy has been, and I think that's unfair. Now I get it. You see, similar archetype. You see, quarterbacks this year at least that had similar results. You see quarterbacks that to some degree are considered mid in kind of that middle tier quarterback rankings. However, I don't think Geno would be able to elevate this offense like Purdy did the last couple of seasons. Maybe I'm wrong there. We haven't seen it yet, but I think that for Purdy's case, Geno, the NFL world does not consider Purdy and Geno similar quarterbacks. That's not the case. Now, Geno is well respected. However, if you were comparing the two on the open market, Purdy would get more than Geno for a variety of reasons, one being age, but also Purdy's just simply better than Geno's been his entire career in just a 2-year span, now a 3-year span off the one down year. Ahmad Z says no team in the NFL would pay Brock $60 million. I agree with you. I think that with the market, Brock has every right to ask for $60 million. Dak got it. Burrow got it, or close to got it. Lawrence almost got it, $55 million guaranteed. But Brock's going to ask for that, as he should. And I think things will come down eventually, but it's about meeting in the middle. And this, to me, if Kawakami's speculation/reporting is correct, feels almost like the initial offer by San Francisco may have been that lowball offer that usually pisses off people like George Kittle, Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, and leads to elongated holdouts, right? San Francisco is known to lowball people, like Dre Area Sports points out here. Clearly, San Francisco is trying to lowball him. I would agree. I think this simply is just the Niners saying, look, if we can, let's see where he's at. Give him a lowball offer and go from there and work ourselves up to whatever he may get eventually. But I do think that, with what Brock Purdy has done, not that he'll get disrespected by it or feel a certain way, but I think it's like Seriously? Like, really? You're giving me $30 million a year? You're giving me a Baker Mayfield-like contract? I mean, I've done more than all those guys have that have got paid before me, outside of Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar Jackson. So, and I guess you can say Joe Burrow as well. Like, Purdy, success-wise, has every right to ask for more money than about 95% of starting quarterbacks in football. I think that's fair to say. Now, not going to get that, but I think it's fair to say that he'll certainly ask for it. Tommy Huxley says here, you got a haircut. When's the next one? 2 years? It was a long time before haircuts or in between haircuts. My hair was long. I certainly miss it. But unfortunately for myself, my wife's best friend's having a baby shower. Thus, I had to clean myself up somewhat. I work from home, so I don't feel the need to often get a haircut. But in this case, when the wife says, get it done, you got to get it done to stay in her good graces. But let's get back to Brock Purdy for a second. Ahmed Z says, Brock's a game manager that's limited. I think Brock has shown the ability that, yes, there's a game manager archetype there. I don't think being a game manager is a bad thing per se. I think, you have quarterbacks that if they are game managers more, they would save themselves some losses. Josh Allen can be really great at times, playing hero ball, can be the MVP this year. Whereas at times, for as great as Josh Allen is, and I think everybody minus the Chiefs would say, give me Josh Allen as my quarterback, maybe not Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, but Brock, I think, has done enough to warrant the respect of, yeah, maybe normally you're a game manager, but at times you can elevate your game to being a great quarterback. And his numbers speak for themselves. The analytics speak for themselves. Brock has done much more than the common game manager label dictates for quarterbacks. Bobo adds on here that Geno Smith and Brock Purdy both throw interceptions when it's time to rely on them. I think it's a little disingenuine, to use this year as the prime example of Brock Purdy, because in previous years, that wasn't Brock. Now, it doesn't excuse the mistakes. Both Brock and Geno this year have had a massive problem in pivotal moments with interceptions against the Dolphins late in the year, against the Cardinals early in the season, against the Lions. Those were clear issues. However, I think Brock had shown the previous 2 years that usually he's pretty safe with the football. He'll give you your big boom plays and can limit the bust plays that unfortunately were common this year for him. However, I don't think it's fair to use 1 year as the overall encompassing example of what Brock does when it comes to takeaways, compared to Geno, who has primarily been that his entire career with the Jets, Giants, and now the Seahawks. Papa J here has a contract prediction here: 5 years, $300 million, 180 guaranteed. I think that makes sense when it comes down to, what Trevor Lawrence got, $270 million. That would be less than what Lawrence got guaranteed by $20 million over the same time period. Now, the AAV involved in that would be around $60 million, matching what Dak Prescott got. So again, I think Brock will ask for a contract along those lines: 5 years, $300 million, $180 million guaranteed. I just think if you're San Francisco, if you are actually looking for a shorter-term deal, I think for Brock and the Niners, having a 4-year contract makes some more sense. That is essentially the window. That is a window of time for your star players. You then see Debo and Kittle and McCaffrey and Ayuk all surpass the age of 30. At that time, Brock would be 30 years old again, and you'd feel okay moving off of him at that time if you'd want to. If he's great, you keep him again. But I think a 4-year deal, you give him 4 years, you give him, I don't know, $4 million. I'm trying to think in my head what the contract would be. 4 years around, I don't know, 250, 260, maybe a little more than that. But you make it clear, obvious. Look, you're a highest paid quarterback, a little under the guarantees of Lawrence and Herbert and Prescott, but I think you have to give Brock the respect on the open market. He will laugh at you. as he should, if you give him a Baker Mayfield style deal. Now, Ahmed Z says, the Brock Sexuals, love these sexual nicknames, Brock Sexuals want him to get $70 million. Well, I can't speak for all Brock Sexuals. I can just say for myself, as someone who does like Brock Purdy, who believes in Brock Purdy, any quarterback, Mahomes, Allen, Prescott, Hurts, Daniels, Lamar Jackson, no one is worth $70 million per year. Now, they'll eventually get there, but Brock ain't getting $70 million a year. That's asinine. I think, if anything, the highest I'd go is 60, which is the market equal. But even then, I'd probably go down to about 55, 50, $48 million per year. I think that's a more comfortable contract for Brock Purdy compared to Brock Sexuals, who believe he'll get $70 million per year. That's insane. That's insane. Let's keep going here. Plus, it's by Leon Sandcastle. Plus, did Jed himself say last year he's prepared to give Brock $50+ million? I think that, I don't know the exact quote you're referring to, but I believe there was at least this kind of, assumption, or at least like this understanding of, hey, like, we're going to pay Brock Purdy. He's our guy. Now, I don't know if there was like an annual value tossed in. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there was. Which again goes into why I think Kawakami's report really doesn't reflect what San Francisco has said. Maybe things have changed, but York, Lynch, Shanahan, they've all been very adamant of like, look, we're paying Brock Purdy. The question has just been simply how long and how much they've done. Let's see what else we have here on the YouTube chat. The great one, coming in hot as always, says, just trade Brock Purdy and get picks or a good defensive player. So let's just entertain this for the sake of conversation. Let's say San Francisco is, they can't come to an agreement. They're entertaining, trade conversations. One, what do you think Brock Purdy gets on the open market via trade? So is it a third-round pick, second-round pick? And you're not guaranteed to get a good defensive player with that pick anyways. For all we know, it's a kicker. So I think that in that case, if you believe Brock gets you a second-round pick or a first-round pick in return, then why not pay him? Like, if your quarterback's worth the first-round pick, why would you not want to pay him? Especially knowing this year, your options on the draft class aren't very good, and who are you going to bring in to replace him? I think that's kind of my, like, okay, you want to trade Brock, but like, then what's the plan if he's gone? Bobo says here, if Brock wants Kirk Cousins or Tua money, he needs to seek a trade to those teams. By those teams, you mean the Falcons and the Dolphins. I hate to break it to you, but I think Kyle was willing to offer Kirk a contract that Brock might get a couple years back. And San Francisco, I think, realizes that, look, we reset the market for Jimmy, and that didn't pan out. And I get there's injury concerns with Brock, the shoulder, the UCL, the durability, fine. But I think that they are more willing to pay Brock than they ever were Jimmy. Kyle was not sold on Jimmy until Lynch got him in the building, and they're like, oh, crap, 5-0, got to pay him now. Whereas for Brock, like, there was never this commitment verbally to Brock as there was with Jimmy, and they paid Jimmy still. So I think like they're going to pay Brock. They're not going to trade him. Like he's going to get paid. That's almost guaranteed at this point. Let's see here. DJ Great Dane says Joshua Dobbs needs to play next season for sure. Well, he's probably not going to play here. He's a free agent. While I would like San Francisco to at least entertain the idea of resigning him, I think he's a good backup quarterback that has mobility. He's certainly boom or bust. There's a lot of great things he can do. At times, though, can be a little wild with the football, and it leads to turnovers. However, I like Joshua Dobbs. I liked him all the way back last year. I thought he was a good Viking. previous year before that. Beat the Cowboys 2 years ago with the Cardinals. Certainly helped San Francisco out early on last season. However, I don't think San Francisco is going to bring him back. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I think he'll be playing elsewhere. I would not be shocked if you find him playing for the Steelers again next season, depending on who they bring back in Fields or Russell Wilson. Great One says, the backup plan, I don't. Maybe you're saying Green 19. Strawberry React says he wants Aaron Rodgers. Man, oh man, oh man. Aaron Rodgers, whew. I'll just tell you this. First off, Aaron Rodgers, California kid. I know San Francisco entertained the idea of trading for him before trading for Trey Lance in the NFL draft and bringing back Jimmy Garoppolo. However, do you really think that Robert Saleh now being in San Francisco opens the door to having Aaron Rodgers come with him? I have a hard time believing that's the case. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I have a hard time after watching Saleh get fired, partly due to Rodgers being in the building in New York. I don't think he'd want him in the building in San Francisco as well. But again, Rodgers can still play. He's just older. It has a lot of off-the-field things to worry about, whereas Brock is younger, doesn't have the same arm as Rodgers does, but is more mobile, and I think comes with literally no off-the-field problems. Like, he ain't dating porn stars. His mechanics aren't a problem. He's not doing ayahuasca. He's not going to be calling for Kyle's job. Brock is a team player through and through. But you also say here that they should just cut him so people stop arguing. I mean, hey, people would argue no matter what San Francisco does, unfortunately. Bobo says here, though, in the YouTube comments, Brock Purdy sucks in the rain and snow, and a lot of football is played in bad weather, especially in January. So, yeah, he doesn't deserve top dollar. He's an average quarterback with a dominant team. I don't know many quarterbacks that do play great in snow or rain. Rain, obviously, a lesser problem in the NFL compared to snow. I also think it doesn't help the fact that they were playing the Bills, who have, of all the quarterbacks in football, the most capable one playing in inclement weather. So I get it. The rain's been a massive problem against the Rams and the Ravens, the picks, the interceptions. You can't defend Brock in those cases. However, you don't really have to play in the rain or snow. That's the first snow game I can think of in recent history San Francisco has played outside of the Green Bay game in the playoffs. Now, that was 2021, I believe. So it's been 3 years since their last snow game. Whereas the playoff games this year, there's really been no weather issues from what I can remember. A lot of them are inside, some are outside, but the weather it's certainly been cold, but Brock hasn't had a problem playing in the cold. It's just when it rains or when it snows, which doesn't really happen often in California anyways. So I don't think it's that big of a problem. But again, you can't defend it. Brock has been relatively bad in pretty poor weather. Continuing here on the YouTube chat, Great One says Purdy is better than Geno. That I agree. He is very better than Geno. Billy Lee says, no way the weather factor is not what determines the price of the contract for Brock Purdy for me. Besides, Brock Purdy made it further than those quarterbacks, regardless of weather. What I want to know is, do the Niners really have more weapons than other teams proven to be winners of Super Bowls? Besides, that was one season, and the sample size is small. Yeah, I mean, if San Francisco walks into negotiations saying, look, Brock, you're great, but the rain really causes you problems, Brock's like, what the heck? You're worried about 2 games, 3 games in my career compared to the entire, long 2 playoff runs I've had? Seriously? Yeah, the rain, while maybe is a bigger problem for fans, I get it, but if that is a factor in negotiations, my God, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Calachipto says that put Brock in Seattle with those weapons being JSN, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, Metcalf, Noah Fant, in that defense, they'd be in the NFC Championship game this year. Well, Seattle's offensive line still sucks, so I wouldn't say that exactly, but I do get your point. I think if, like, take this year, for example, if Deebo Samuel still wasn't good, and you had Kittle the entire year, which they did, and you had, even if you had Jordan Mason for the whole year, and you, like, I firmly believe this, the biggest factor in a lot of the offensive problems they had was, yes, defenses were attacking them differently, but nobody could separate offensively. So I think if you had Pearsall for the entire year, or you had Ayuk healthy and didn't hold out or hold in, and you had him the entire time, I think you would have at least seen games be 2 or 3 of them have different outcomes. Now, which ones? Probably the one against Seattle in the second half, maybe the one against the Dolphins late in the year. I do think there would have been 2 or 3 games that would have been wins, not losses, had they simply just had a receiver that could separate consistently. Now, maybe I'm wrong there too, but I think Brock in the first quarter of the season was phenomenal, and then things kind of took a tailspin late. But I think if you put, like, a lot of the talk is, like, put Brock on the open market and see what he gets. You can flip that and say, well, put Brock on XYZ team and see what they can do. Like, put Brock on Cincinnati. Would they be as good as with Joe Burrow? Probably not. But they'd still be a competent and well-tuned offense. You put Brock in Seattle. You put Brock with the Cardinals. You put Brock with even the Saints. Like, they'd be a better team. And a lot of those rosters I listed are not very good. So I think that, Brock, I think, is, funny enough, is almost underrated by part of the fan base and to a certain degree overrated by, as Amon pointed out earlier, the Brocksexuals that wanted to get $70 million per year. Let's see what else is here on the YouTube chat. It's a groovy hairdo. Thank you so much, Papa J. Let's see what else we got here. Niners Goat says being a game manager isn't a bad thing, but it definitely isn't worth $60 million a year. I would push back and say, well, Dak got it. I mean, now maybe you use Dallas as the outlier, but Dak got it. Tua almost got it. And I think Brock has proven to be better than both those guys. So again, who you are and the way you played, well, yes, does dictate how much you can get. They're like the bigger, I guess, like underlying factor into what quarterbacks get is the market value. And unfortunately for San Francisco, in this case, the market value dictates that, well, Dak got 60. Why shouldn't Brock? Now, I don't think he'll get that, but still. Leon Sandcastle makes a great point here that there has never been an elite quarterback that isn't a good game manager. You need to be a good game manager to be elite. I think it's a great point. Look at Tom Brady throughout his entire career. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. Take Joe Montana, for example. Joe Montana, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, the greatest in San Francisco 49ers history, even Mahomes. Yes, all 3 of those guys have the ability to make fourth quarter comebacks and make these elite level throws, off schedule plays. They can all do it to different degrees, obviously. They can all do it. They can all elevate their game in the biggest moments possible. However, in that same vein, every single one of them knew when to check it down, knew when to play it safe, knew when to keep their team in games and not make these catastrophic mistakes that these kind of wild quarterbacks do. Josh Allen, early in his career, and even at times still, has to learn to be a game manager. You don't always have to hit the home run, but you do need the ability to, when things get tough and they get tight, make the great plays. That's what separates elite quarterbacks from good quarterbacks. It's you're a game manager. You can win 10 games a year. You can go to the playoffs, but in the fourth quarter, with 2 minutes left down by 3, can you score a touchdown? Can you force overtime? Mahomes does it. Brady does it. Montana did it. And many others do it as well. But I think it's important to realize that Brock already has the baseline stuff down. He's a game manager. And I think at times, albeit you want him to be more consistent, he does and has shown small glimpses of being able to lift his team up in clutch moments. Now, again, you want it to happen more consistently, but I do think Brock certainly has that in him to be in the upper echelon of quarterbacks. Fish and Chips says here, Jed Sexuals, where they at? Jim Harbaugh may be the anti-Jed Sexual. I'll tell you that, with the beef they have. Strawberry Reacts says, I haven't seen anyone say he can get $70 million. I haven't either. However, I'm sure there are some that say pay Brock whatever he wants. Maybe that's where that comes from. But I think I'm almost being more kind of facetious in regards to saying, like, look, they want to pay him an egregious amount of money because they like him so much. Niners Goat says, who is trading and paying Brock? Let's be real Niner fans. I think it's a good point, but I do think, say you wipe the slate clean of all quarterbacks, right? Like, if you weren't tied to like dead cap hits and stuff like that, and teams could just pay quarterbacks, like the Saints would pay Brock, the Giants would pay Brock, the Browns would pay Brock, and there's more involved in there too, but like there are clear teams that would pay Brock Purdy a large chunk of money if they could. Like, Brock would get a pretty big contract on the open market, especially in this quarterback class that really is not that good. Like, you have Cam Ward, who probably goes number 1 to Tennessee, but then you have like Shooter Sanders and Jackson Dart, and there's a lot of questions around those guys where their ceilings might be Jalen Hurts, for example, but their floors are like Deshaun Kaiser, and you're like, oh my God, that's not a first-round draft pick. And I'm not comparing those guys to Deshaun Kaiser and whatnot, but I'm just saying, like, this is not a great quarterback class. So on the open market this year, Brock would get paid. Context does matter when it comes to this case. Great One says, just because someone might give you a first doesn't mean Purdy's worth the first. I mean, I guess, but in that case, it kind of does mean that, because if you had Brock Purdy's, like, if you went back and you redrafted the 2022 draft class, Brock Purdy goes top 5 instantly. However, I do like this now, not for Brock Purdy, but Great One says Crosby being Max Crosby for Brock Purdy. I think the Raiders either get Russell Wilson or somebody else, but I do like the idea of trading for Max Crosby, albeit it kind of seems like it's not going to happen now with Pete Carroll in charge of the Raiders with Tom Brady in place. Robbie439 says, people don't understand that Brock's going to get paid for the reasons off the field too. He's the most marketable player in the league, and the Niners have been looking for a face of the franchise for years. He's not the most marketable in the league, but his story certainly plays. Last pick in the draft, going to get a big contract, almost won the MVP, went to the Super Bowl. So I think that he certainly is one of the more marketable people in the NFL for sure. We can all agree, though, that Brock will get paid. And at that point in time, we can see what the future holds. Hopefully, that it's good stuff for San Francisco. But again, tell me down below what you think of Tim Kawakami's reporting / speculation saying, and I quote again, I heard from a plugged-in NFL source this week that the Niners and Purdy are indeed feeling like there won't be fireworks, won't be drama on the way to an eventual deal. But I've also heard generally that the framework might be a little different than some other recent quarterback deals. I suspect this means the Niners could be pitching a shorter-term, lesser guaranteed deal compared to the full-time commitments of deals like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert. Again, what would you sign Brock Purdy to? What do you think he gets on the open market? And tell me down below what you think of Kawakami's reporting for the SF Standard today on Purdy and the Niners negotiations. Don't forget to follow us on social media at 49ers _access is the X for Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. If you want to go to a concert, a sporting event this year, use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to feel like the GOAT, go click that link down below and buy yourself some GOAT fuel. I got mine today. They sent me 12 cans of it. I had never had it before, and I said, ooh, I drank some. I got busy with work, popped out about 13 articles, was out there doing my stuff, and I had the Jerry Rice veins. I felt like the GOAT getting my work done. So click that link down below and get yourself some GOAT fuel. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Thank you to every single person on the YouTube comments. Thank you so much. And again, as always, my name is Sterling Bennett, and until next time, stay faithful.